Hello and welcome to today's Exposure Ninja podcast. So in today's live episode, we're going to be talking about profitable paid search strategies for 2025. Like SEO, tried and tested strategies that used to work, they're becoming unstuck. Google's been building AI into every part of its advertising product, search, shopping, PMax, demand gen, video, display, you name it, it's there. So I'm Charlie Marchant, CEO at Exposure Ninja, and today I'm joined by Tom Goodwin, who is our head of PPC. We're going to get straight into talking about what search looked like last year and how it's changing in 2025. But if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer those during today's podcast. You can drop them into the chat and we'll come to them as soon as we have time. So, Tom, kick us off by talking a little bit about how paid search changed last year in 2024.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, I think in a word, it's no surprise that the main kind of theme is automation and AI. So Google announced all of their changes, both to the Google Ads product and to their overall product in two conferences that happened at the start of the year, Google I/O and Google Marketing Live. Now, last year at Google I/O, they announced the changes involving the generative search experience, or as it's now known, AI overviews. And we know that that's hugely important for any advertiser that's relying on search traffic, especially organic traffic. Similar changes have basically come from the paid side as well. So at Google Marketing Live, there was 30 plus announcements about changes to the Google Ads product. And pretty much all of them referenced Google's AI, Gemini, as it's commonly known, at some level. Probably the best known change in terms of Google's overall advertising product that's happened in recent years is Performance Max, which is their flagship product. And I know that's what we talked about last year in this podcast. So there was a whole bunch of changes with Performance Max. And I know that's a format that is really divisive for a lot of advertisers and a lot of businesses, because for some businesses and some advertisers, that works phenomenally well. And for others, it just doesn't work or doesn't behave properly. And it doesn't matter what vertical you're in or what size of advertiser you are. It's something that really does divide opinions. So you can be a household name retailer and find that these formats aren't working for you. Samsung was one that in the early days just didn't work with Performance Max at all. Or you can be a very small business and find that one of these products is super effective. So it's quite an in-depth topic to talk about.
How would a business know, Tom, if Performance Max is going to work for them? Is there anything that they could know before they start testing it that would tell them whether it's worth going for?
Well, I think it's probably a good starting point to look at how the product works. So Performance Max integrates 6 different types of inventory. Most people still think of Google Ads as links on a search page, and typically on a desktop device. But that's not really how the product actually is anymore. So Performance Max integrates your search inventory with your video inventory on YouTube, with your display inventory as well, so the Google Display Network, and also like many other formats within Google's ecosystem. And what's really powering that is the audience data that they have in the background. So it's basically giving you the opportunity to appear in front of your potential customer wherever they are within Google's remit. So if they're on a Gmail interface and they see the ad there, if they're looking on their mobile on a local direction search, they can see your ad there. But really, what's driving that is the data that Google has about that user. So probably one of the best starting points is to look at your own data and to look at your kind of ideal customer persona, and just try to understand how that actual persona might interact. So if you're a B2B business, you might be looking at someone in a HR department, or you might be looking at someone with purchasing authority. If you're a B2C customer, there's going to be some markers there as well. So right now, you might be a business looking to target the health and fitness category, because that's very important. After Christmas, you've got this sudden boost in people looking for health and fitness queries. So this kind of information is super important to be aware of. And then when it comes to Performance Max, if you're an e-commerce retailer, you've got the shopping feed. So one of those 6 formats is Google Shopping, and that is by far has always been the most profitable part of the Google Ads ecosystem if you're selling a physical product.
Mm-hmm. Great advice, Tom. How confident are you feeling about predicting what's going to happen in paid search this year?
Well, this is an interesting one. So I can be confident in the sense that it's no surprise again that artificial intelligence is going to be the buzzword. In fact, they've come out early this year. So Google's CEO has come out and said that last year was the year of large language learning models, and this year is the year of AI agents, or the agentic AI era. In simple terms, that basically means that we should be expecting AI to be even further embedded into the Google Ads product. And this is something that people are expecting, like whether they're brand new to Google Ads or whether they've been in the industry for many years. So I often tell people that, I started out back in 2010, and one of the first things I learned about was the importance of having negative keywords on broad match, because even back then that was something that was very important for someone learning Google Ads new, that you've really got to refine your keyword queries, and broad match is very open. Well, now actually Google's recommendation is that you should be gradually evolving your account towards broad match, because broad match is the only match type that works with all of the signals that they have to hand about the user. So that's basically flipped a lot of the established best practice right on its head. And that's something that's only really been the case for the last few years.
Okay, so what have you seen so far that's been working well based on the Google Ads accounts that you've been looking at?
Well, there's a few different strategies that work quite nicely, and there's quite a few different individual tactics that can work quite nicely also. I think one of the strategies that you'll see a lot if you're in the consumer space is what's known as like a full funnel strategy, or a search everywhere strategy. And this is something that actually we've been talking about from the SEO perspective at Exposure Ninja quite a lot also, which is that search overall has historically been very much like a synonym for Google. So when you think search, you think Google. But now that's not really the case. People are searching on different platforms. They're searching outside of search engines a lot more. They're getting their advice from different places. I was reading an article just the other day that the travel industry has changed so much as a result of TikTok that backpackers don't carry backpacks anymore, because apparently there's a lot of TikTok influencers who talk about packing small suitcases in the perfect kind of way. And so a lot of backpackers leaving off, heading out into South East Asia are now carrying suitcases with wheels rather than backpacks. So even small changes like that can be important. So these full funnel and search everywhere strategies, they basically work on the premise that instead of just paying for your ad to be at the top of the kind of conventional search results, you need to make sure that you appear in multiple different places. And there are some reasons why that's a really effective strategy. Probably the simplest reason why that's effective is that the other bits of inventory that Google have are more cost effective. So you can see very high CPCs in traditional search. It's a very competitive space, and everyone wants to be number one. Everyone wants to get to the top of Google. That's why we wrote the book. Whether it's like paid or organic, everyone wants to be number one. But actually, there's a lot of other areas where you can now tap into with search, where you can get a cheaper click for the same customer. And a search everywhere strategy has benefits in the sense that you might be able to combine different inventory types too. So you're going to see a benefit if you, for example, run meta ads alongside your Google ads. You'll see that those meta ads will actually prompt brand searches, and so you'll be seeing better profitability on your Google ads as a result of running those two channels together.
Yeah, awesome. And if anyone's wondering what we're talking about with Search Anywhere, you may have seen, or not yet seen, a video that Tim put out on the Exposure Ninja YouTube channel back in December called Google's Worst Nightmare, which is talking about Google losing its traffic share for the first time last year. And when we're thinking about search, we're thinking so much more broadly now than just Google search, because not only are AI platforms eating some of that search, but we're seeing people searching across more and more, so many different platforms, also Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, Meta, etc. The search journey is becoming more complex, which is what you're talking about really with full funnel strategies, Tom, and thinking about how people are moving through those different touch points before they come to a website and either become a lead or make a purchase. Do you think that businesses who already invest in PPC need to make changes based on this? Or do you think if they've got something that's working, do they just push harder at doing the same thing? What would your advice be, knowing that those search habits are changing to have so many different touch points?
Well, I think it's almost impossible just to keep up with every change. So kind of keeping up with each individual change is almost a full-time job in itself. If you have an account that's working really well, I mean, we see this quite often. So we see businesses that drive, let's say, 80% of their traffic from SEO, and it's fantastic and it works until there's a change in SEO, and then suddenly you're at risk. And you can also see businesses that drive 80% of their traffic from, let's say, Google Ads, and it's fantastic and it works until there's a change, and then your CPCs are rising, and it's quite a difficult place to be. So it's always a good idea just to kind of mitigate that risk by testing all the other channels. I would say. Obviously, there's a lot to do in that space, so you need to take time and have a kind of a proper test and learn plan. But generally speaking, like it's a pretty good idea to have a game plan in mind for what's working now and what could work in the future as well. Staying up to date is definitely an important choice to make. I think also if you've got an account that's doing well, you usually see performance improve over time for a variety of different reasons. But sometimes you have advertisers who reach a kind of a plateau, or you have businesses where you're kind of confident that your account's in really good shape. And I was auditing one just recently, in fact, that it's a legal services business. They know the account's in really good shape. But even though the audit score was in the high 80s, it was one of the best run accounts, you can still find opportunities there. So it's worth kind of getting a second opinion sometimes. And obviously, like we can do that at Exposure Ninja via the free marketing review as well.
Great. We had a pretty interesting question about future predictions come in around whether you think there'll be more ads coming into different AI chat results, especially with AIs recommending more products, which we see that kind of thing happening on Google already. But do you think that's going to be a trend that happens across ChatGPT and the other types of AI platforms?
So that is an interesting one. Sam Altman's come out and said that he doesn't expect to have adverts in ChatGPT, but he also said that he didn't expect to lose so much money on ChatGPT. He thought the $20 subscription would be okay to cover their costs. That isn't the case, because there is effectively a huge arms race on who can build the most AI infrastructure. The general guidance with Google is, and this is something that we've done a few videos about now, especially the antitrust case that came out this year and the information there. You have to treat Google as not necessarily like acting in your best interest. It's a fantastic platform, but it's also acting very much in their interests, and their interest is always to increase the revenue that they're getting from their own advertising products. So generally speaking, Google will always try to slowly monetize more of the search results and slowly monetize more of their other inventory types. Even if you from a kind of a day-to-day level, look at how that's happened on YouTube most recently, you'll see a lot more ads on YouTube than you ever used to. So I definitely expect there to be more adverts in unusual places. Ideally, the guidance that you get from Google is that they'll only tend to serve an ad where they feel it's relevant. So if you look at what happens with the AI overviews, you'll see that the way that they serve paid ads in AI overviews is that they give you the information, which is ultimately what the user is looking for. And then they almost pivot and recommend commercial services. So they'll give you information that answers your question, And then at the bottom of that information, as you finish reading, they'll say, and here are some products you can buy, or here are some well-known service providers you can consider. And that will be the sponsored element. So it's quite an elegant way to do it. But you can definitely see how that will be much more important for them going forward.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning that if you do see great results from the organic space, to consider like where you've got the paid opportunities on top and incrementality there. Sorry. And if you are seeing great results on paid, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't opportunities in the organic space also. So sometimes it can be a hybrid question there. You're on mute, Charlie.
Thanks, Tom. I think there's going to have to be a natural progression with AI generative engines. Like you say, they're in an arms race now, but more and more as users start to trust them, use ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. more, they've already started integrating actual links to websites. They've started integrating map packs on certain searches in Gen AI as well. I think the next natural progression will be for those with a stake. They're all going to want to generate their own revenue through ads in those platforms. I think it would be really short-sighted to do it too early, because what they're going to do then is risk the trust of the users who are still in that learning phase of using Gen AI engines and trusting ChatGPT or whichever one that you use. So will there be a shift? Yeah, I expect it probably is going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be immediate, because they're going to build that trust first. Let's talk a bit more about profitable paid search strategies. And Tom, where would you start with creating a profitable paid search strategy in 2025?
I think probably I'd start with just the commercials. So I would say that paid searches tends to work quite well for a wide range of businesses, but it can be a question of maturity. For how well established your brand is, whether it's a new business. Ideally, you want to have those kind of calculations out on paper before you kind of start working on building your Google Ads campaign. So you almost want to kind of put everything down in a spreadsheet, in a calculation before you get going. Once you've established that, and you can look at, I'd be looking, when we have a marketing review, one of the first things I look at is, okay, well, what kind of revenue, what kind of margin does this company have, the average order value, whether there'd be, like a lifetime value that's important to look at. You need to kind of have an idea of these kind of numbers and ratios to see, okay, well, how much can I actually spend on Google Ads, or how much should I spend on Google Ads and other products too. That's one of the best places to start. The next is then to really start thinking about the marketing funnel. And I'd always recommend building from the bottom of the funnel up. So generally speaking, and I see a lot of advertisers will still not bid on their own brand with paid search. I'd start with that. So I'd start with looking at, okay, well, how many people are searching for your brand or your business every month in your target market. You might find that that's a really good place to start, because that way you're capturing more information for Google to then build into their algorithmic bidding. So if you're bidding on your brand and you're catching people from the brand ads, rather than first of all, you protect against your competitors being there, and you also protect against affiliates being there or stockists being there. So if you sell a physical product, sometimes the retailer appears for your product name as well. But if you have that brand ad in place, you know that you've got the most profitable starting point for any PPC, for any paid search campaign. And from there, you can start building either a shopping campaign. You might want to try Performance Max straight away and just use that as a creative format. I've seen lots of accounts where they just have Performance Max and brand, and that works quite nicely. Or you might take a different strategy depending on your verticals. So for B2B businesses, for example, there might be specific phrases that are really cornerstone for your business. And those individual phrases can be quite subtle, but you know that your ideal customer is looking for something exactly using that language. Although those are the phrases that you probably want to be most present on, because those are the phrases that hopefully, you kind of know this is roughly how your customer searches. Let's try that with a small budget to start with. It's also worth mentioning that most of the ad platforms will offer free advertising credit for new advertisers. So Google offer free advertising credit. If you've not advertised with Google before, you can get £1,200, and I think probably the same in US dollars. And it will basically match that spend. And the same is true for Microsoft. So if you want to kind of make use of those offers, you can kind of treat that as your starting budget.
That's an awesome idea. One of the questions that we had earlier as well was a business that has seasonality and knows in advance that they have high seasons and low seasons. When they're building that into their paid search strategy, what would you recommend they do in order to capitalize on that seasonality?
So this is an interesting one. And the example I'll give will be Christmas, which has just gone. So I actually used to work in a gift shop, not a physical gift shop, but like a gift retailer. Mm-hmm. And this gift retailer would spend the first 3 quarters of the year planning Christmas. And the reason they did that was because 85% of the revenue happened in that final quarter. And in fact, it was the Christmas seasonality is so predictable. If you look at Google Keyword Planner, you can more or less say with precision exactly how much volume you get on these terms. And it starts more or less at the end of the summer when you see kind of the first shelves becoming Christmas in supermarkets. And then it gradually builds through the kind of period when the festive drinks are in the coffee shops. And then you've got bonfire night. And you can actually physically see online how this seasonality builds to a crescendo with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, as it's now a major online shopping season. Mm-hmm. Google is pretty good, and Google, Meta, all of the platforms are pretty good at predicting that seasonality because that data is so available to them. So the smart bidding solutions that are now most widely used for paid search and paid social, they're actually pretty good at capturing the seasonality. But what I'd always recommend if you've got a seasonal business is to again, start with the end in mind. So you've got that information to hand. Let us kind of like map you out exactly how you think the budget is going to flow. So another great example is outdoor furniture, strangely. So right now we're in a kind of winter period. No one is buying outdoor furniture. As soon as you have the first sunshine appear, the first sunny weekend, there's a huge spike in outdoor furniture. So actually that's one of the kind of key seasons if you're in that market. And that can be quite predictable. You see it year after year, exactly when the first sunny weekend happens.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So going back to what you were talking about with branded search and running ads on your own brand name, if a business is running both SEO and content work, so they're doing pretty well in their organic listings, would you still be recommending that they are using their budget towards some of those branded terms? Does it depend on the business? Does it depend on the search, the SERPs? Does it depend on the search results? What would you do?
I mean, this is another common question. I know that Dale, who's not on this podcast, would have a different opinion to me, but it's generally the recommendation I find to bid on that traffic, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, it's your core customer. So if someone's searching for your business, it's almost like signposting them to your website. By bidding in that space, yes, you're paying a small amount to capture the click when previous, if it's an organic result, it'd be free of charge. But you're also pushing down any competitors further down the SERP, and you're basically taking ownership of that top of Google space, which is quite a valuable real estate. So I often describe it to businesses as a bit like, imagine if you opened a shop on kind of like your local high street or like in a city somewhere. You'd pay for the cost of opening the shop, which is actually running the business, but you wouldn't want to economize on the signage at the front because that's how someone knows it's your shop. It's a bit like this. The second reason, which is more relevant in recent years, is that as I think I mentioned earlier, the clicks that you get on your branded search, basically they tell Google this is what our customer looks like. So it's quite useful for that information to be passed into a Google Ads platform, because then when you're building out the rest of your activity on the non-brand or shopping or PMAX space, you've got that signal on who you're looking for in the system, and Google's then better at optimizing for that traffic. So if you're planning to spend, a reasonable amount of money and driving a reasonable amount of a reasonable percentage of your business revenue from paid search, definitely go for the branded space. The other thing to mention is that there's been quite a few studies on whether there's incrementality. People have different views. So there's a Google study that unsurprisingly believes that you get incrementality from doing this. And there's an eBay study that suggests that it might be just as good to have no bidding on your brand. There's no set consensus, but what I tend to do is I tend to look at what the main advertisers are doing. So Amazon is a great example. If you Google Amazon right now, you'll see a paid search ad at the top, and that's because they're pretty much Google's biggest customer in the advertising space. They've run their own surveys and analysis on it. And even though no one in their right mind would bid on the Amazon brand, because you'd be deluged with lots and lots of traffic and it'd be very expensive to do so, they believe it's valuable for them to own that space and just capture that bit of market share.
Okay, cool. I noticed in your notes about paid search strategies and creating profitable ones this year, you've got a test, learn, question phrase there. Is that for when advertisers or when businesses are setting up new campaigns, they've got them live, they've got them running, they're comparing them? Is that there for that, to think about, are we testing, are we learning, are we questioning this and the ROI that it's making?
Yeah, I think it's a general kind of advice that you get from the platforms is to always be testing. It's almost like always be closing if you're a salesperson, always be testing if you're an online marketer. You kind of don't know what you don't know, so it's good advice to you can see this with some larger retailers. They always allocate a part of their budget to just trying something new. It's good advice to kind of do that, because you don't necessarily know what might work for you in an unexpected way. Generally speaking as well, I think it's quite a nice cadence to have. So whether you're running your kind of advertising in-house, or if you have a freelancer, or if you have an agency, kind of almost like setting up that rigor of, okay, what are we testing this quarter? What new channel or what new strategy are we testing this quarter? Even it could be as simple as, okay, let's do a test on the website whether we show, for example, the products or the people behind the product. That's a common test for websites. Landing page testing is also quite a useful one. So if you know that you've got certain landing pages, maybe you're a service business and you know that you've got a landing page that promotes that service and it leads through to a lead capture. Well, there's a few things you can test on that page that might increase your conversion rate. If you can increase your conversion rate by 50%, then that's a huge win compared to last year.
Massively so. So talk a little bit to me about the things you would measure to decide if a campaign's performing well, and at what point, Tom, you might look at a campaign and say, like, okay, maybe we've tested that and time to allocate budget elsewhere or experiment with something else. What kind of things are you looking to see from a commercial perspective when we're talking about CPAs, the ROAS, or even the ROI on the campaigns?
So, you can start by, I guess if you're selling a product or a service where there's a lot of demand, you're going to have a number of leads captured, or you're going to have a lot of products being sold. Probably it's the easiest is if you're e-commerce and you have a low value product, you can see quite clearly, okay, well, I spent this much, I made this much, and I can work out my ROAS, and I can roughly kind of see whether something is working, and I can compare keywords, or I can compare campaigns and products. If you're a lead gen business, then you're quite often talking about the cost per acquisition or the cost per lead, but then you need that additional bit of information about what's the quality of the leads. So it can be quite easy to focus too much on the number of leads and the cost of the leads, but then when you actually look through the list of what you generated, it's not quite what you're looking for. It's, maybe they're not qualified, maybe they don't have the budget, maybe you're looking for a B2B lead and you've got too many job seekers or too many consumer leads. So there's a little bit more information that you need to find there, and that's something that you can start kind of interrogating that data. Just, even the simplest way is to kind of like pass that information back to your kind of advertising team, or you could even contact customers. I've done that before, where you telephone them and survey them as to how did you find us, and these kind of things. If you're in a situation, and this is quite a common one as well, where you're selling maybe like a high value product, or that you don't need that many leads, or you don't need that many sales. You just need, like, let's say 2 or 3 sales a month, or 2 or 3 leads a month. Well, then you start looking probably more so about soft conversions, and you start looking at how people are engaging. So common ways to value that would be to look at, okay, so how long is someone spending on the site? Are they viewing key pages, like, for example, case studies, or are they downloading publications that you might have on your site? These are the things that I'd look to try and track and judge whether a campaign's working. And that can be, that can also be supported with, I suppose, a little bit of judgment and kind of common sense. So it might be that you've kind of pulled this data together, you've given it a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and you've got the data telling you something. But then actually, when you go and check with the kind of shop floor or the coalface, they actually know, okay, well, all the best leads are coming from this space, or everything that's coming through on the phone isn't working, but everything that's coming through where someone's come to the website is working. So you have that bit of information, which is well worth knowing as well.
That's great. I also think if someone's looking at their ad account and they've been trying to interrogate that data, and it's actually quite a big job if you're one person or if you're a small marketing team, then it's pretty normal, I think, to ask for second opinions from agencies or from consultants to understand, actually, how are my ads performing, and how do they look across my industry? Like, how does this compare to other accounts? Because if you're in-house, if you're just working on your business, or you're the marketing team in a specific business, you're only seeing that one ad account, and agencies get such an overview of how different ad accounts perform and how they work and what it looks like, to know a bit more in terms of benchmarking what's normal. So if that is something that you would like, then you can always go through our request for a free marketing review, and that's something that our PPC team can have a look at for you, so that you can also get that sort of second opinion on how it's going. Tom, I've got a couple of questions that have come through that I'm going to ask before we finish our session for today. So the first one is actually a little bit more about search in general, but it's whether Google is pushing us as businesses to build ultra fast loading websites, and how important that is in terms of appearing top in the search results, but also in the context of what we're talking about, in making sure that people convert from their ads.
100%. So I'll give a short answer for that one, which is yes. The importance of speed, which really came about a couple of years ago, and it's especially like an SEO set of signals. The importance of speed to Google is fundamental. They've done a lot of work on their own product to make it faster and faster. So, I've got some gray hair. I'm at the age where I can still just roughly remember when Google first came out. And you can see how Google's changed over time. It's become faster. It auto completes. It's very important, really, from Google's perspective, that when you click through onto a site, that the site loads extremely quickly. The other main dynamic that's pushing that is the general shift to mobile search. So it's the end of the year. We did like a kind of 2024 wrapped in the PPC team and Exposure Ninja. And we found that of all the money that we spent on behalf of all our clients, the mobile percentage had risen from 71% to 75% in the last year. So it's now like it's exactly 3/4 of all the money that we've spent on behalf of our clients has actually gone on mobile devices. And that still surprises people who think that, primarily think of their website in desktop terms, that actually a lot of the traffic is now mobile. Mobile users, they tend to operate. You can just see how people use mobiles on, if you're kind of commuting, you can see on the train everyone's on their phone, how quickly they're scrolling. The internet's gradually eroding our attention span, which is one reason why speed is important. as well. But also, I guess, both from an SEO perspective and also from the paid perspective, because of quality score, the faster that a website loads, the less likely a user is to bounce back to the search results. So you're engaging them straight away, and that's a better user experience, it's better search experience. That's why Google's really pushing that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's so common now for businesses who sell more on mobile, that know more of their leads or more of their sales and conversions come through mobile, to actually just be building their websites mobile first, and the desktop is almost the secondary part of that design, because it's so important that a user has a great experience when they're shopping on mobile, when they're browsing on mobile. We had a question a little while ago about keywords, Tom, so I'm taking it back. Would you recommend broad match keywords over phrases and exact match keywords, or is it more nuanced than that?
It's a little more nuanced, but it's not crazily nuanced. So generally speaking, back in the day, you'd always favor exact and phrase match keywords, and you'd have a long list of keywords, and you'd be bidding on stuff like misspellings and plurals, and generally you always saw the best performance on exact match, then phrase match, and then broad match was really very bad unless you had a lot of negative keywords surrounding it. That's flipped on its head a little bit with the era of smart bidding. So broad match has kind of been rebuilt in the sense that Google now encourage broad match because it shows you the widest, it serves your ads in the widest possible way. And then they overlay these different signals that they have, like whether you're on a mobile device and which location you're in and your search history and what you've been shopping for recently. They layer those signals on top of broad match. So in theory, what that means is that you're kind of finding your ideal customer wherever they are. Why I say it's a bit more nuanced than that is that it quite often depends on your verticals. So I would give completely different advice if you're in, let's say, if you're a dentist, or if you're in the service industries, and you know that, as I said before, like your customers are using very specific language, very specific terms. It's quite widely known that performance max and broad match aren't working perfectly in these specific industries. So actually the advice is to go against Google's advice if you're advertising one of these businesses, and actually just to focus your activity on search, and just to try and focus as much of your search budget as possible on exact and phrase match. That's going to complicate matters from a Google side when and if they remove match types. Exactly. So it's quite expected in the industry that match types will at some point be removed, and you'll just be left with broad match. But we're not there yet, and I don't think we'll be there next year either.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so last question before I wrap us up. If you had to distill down everything we've spoken about today into one or two recommendations for businesses who are using Google Ads and paid search this year, what would you recommend?
I think probably the biggest recommendation is to keep learning. There's so many changes in this industry that just generally being aware of the content. I mean, it's the first step that you've already done by joining this podcast. So I imagine we're speaking to an audience of people who are interested in these topics and learning as well. But yeah, keep that focus on learning. Find out what you don't know. Look at what your competitors are doing. Be kind of curious and be aware of the changes that are happening in the space. And tied with that is testing. So if you have an account that's working, that's great. But what else can you do? What other channels? Where can you take those learnings? How can you build upon what you've already got? If you haven't tried paid search or Google Ads before, then as I mentioned, you've got this incentive from the platforms that's helpful and can make it more profitable. Also, if you tried it and it hasn't worked before, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't work today. So just be aware of that, and be aware if you've been burnt perhaps by a paid search agency before, and you've just focused on organic search, you've just focused on meta ads. I quite often see businesses where they are missing one key kind of bit of the full set, and then you ask the question why, and there's always a story there. So maybe make it your New Year's resolution to kind of test something that you know hasn't worked, Almost a good bit of advice there. But yeah, I think in general, like it's a very fast-moving space. It's useful to have a third opinion as well. I think we mentioned the marketing review. That's a great free service that you can tap into and get some kind of bespoke advice for your business. It's very much something that is a space that requires a little bit of thought and a little bit of energy.
Amazing. I feel like learning and testing is the key to all successful marketing. I think it's great advice for anyone who's running ads, but for anyone who works in a marketing role and is experimenting with trying to find the most profitable strategy this year, I think that is always the best advice. Tom, thank you so much for your time and your excellent brain power of all things paid search. If you asked a question and we didn't get to it, because there were so many, and thank you for all of the brilliant questions, please drop them into the comments on LinkedIn, because this video will be going out there, or on YouTube, and one of our team will try and get back to you with an answer to your question. So, or if you think of something new that you want to ask, you can also drop it there as well. Next week, you can join us for talking about content marketing strategies and creating absolutely flawless ones for search in 2025. And you are always welcome to request a free website and marketing review from Exposure Ninja. Just go to exposureninja.com/review. Thanks so much, everyone.